My name is Sarah, a 21-year-old college student, and this story unfolded last summer when I returned from a break in Oregon. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision to surprise my family, so I kept my arrival a secret, buzzing with anticipation as I wheeled my luggage through the familiar streets of my small northeastern hometown. I was eager to see their shocked faces, but when I pushed open the front door, expecting warm embraces and gasps of joy from my parents, I was met with an empty house. They weren't home yet. My excitement dimmed briefly, but then I heard a familiar voice. It was my younger brother, Ethan, who had just turned 19. He was taller now, with a grin that could brighten any space. "Ethan," I called, dropping my suitcase for a heartfelt hug. It felt effortless and warm, though I couldn't ignore how much more grown-up he seemed since I'd last seen him. I shut the door and exhaled deeply. The quiet house enveloped me, and the reality of being home after a long journey from college, complete with packed buses and chaotic train platforms, settled in. I was exhausted and craved a moment to unwind. Heading straight for the shower, I let the warm water cascade over me, washing away the grime of travel. For the first time in weeks, I felt my tension ease. The semester had been grueling, endless assignments, tight deadlines, and the relentless pace of campus life. But now, standing under the spray, I let my shoulders relax and breathed freely. After drying off, I slipped into a loose, breezy sundress, the kind you wear when you're not trying too hard. Barefoot, I padded to my room, nudging the door open and sinking into the familiar comfort. My old band posters still clung to the walls, and my bed was made with my favorite soft sheets. It was like stepping back into a past version of myself, but something else was nagging at me. I'd been so consumed with school and part-time work that my personal life had taken a backseat. The closeness I once took for granted had faded. Sure, I'd gone on a few dates, but nothing meaningful, and living in a dorm with thin walls and nosy roommates didn't exactly lend itself to relaxation. As I sank onto my bed, the thought lingered. It wasn't just about wanting someone else. It was about reconnecting with myself. Idly, I picked up my phone and scrolled aimlessly, but my mind drifted elsewhere. Lying back against the pillows, I let my fingers graze my skin. It was instinctive, a way to ground myself. My hands traced my arms, my collarbone, and the soft fabric of my dress. A shaky breath escaped me as I let myself feel present, unwinding from the stress I'd been carrying. I was lost in the moment when a knock at my door jolted me. My heart raced, and I fumbled to set my phone aside. Ethan's voice came softly from the other side. I quickly smoothed my dress and called for him to come in. He hesitated at the threshold before stepping inside, and I could tell something was bothering him. His usual easygoing demeanor was replaced by a quiet unease. Ethan stood there awkwardly before perching on the edge of my bed, running a hand through his hair. I stayed quiet, giving him space to speak. After a moment, he opened up, his words halting at first. He started talking about his girlfriend. From what I'd heard before, I assumed they were content, typical carefree young love. But things weren't as rosy as they seemed. They argued constantly, over trivial matters and bigger issues alike. Ethan felt like nothing he did was enough. She'd get upset about things he didn't even understand, and the fights left him drained. He cared about her, but he wasn't sure he could keep going. The relationship was starting to feel like a weight. As he spoke, I noticed how much he'd changed. He wasn't the goofy kid I used to tease. There was a quiet maturity to him now, a depth I hadn't seen before. His frame was broader, his features sharper. He carried himself differently, with a confidence he didn't have when I left for college. I listened, half focused on his words and half struck by this new side of him. There was something captivating about him, something that made it hard to look away. He kept talking, opening up more than he ever had. He admitted he'd thought about ending things with her, but wasn't sure he had the strength to follow through. I wanted to comfort him, to say something that would ease his burden. Instead, I did what felt instinctive. I leaned in and wrapped my arms around him. It wasn't a polite, obligatory hug. It was genuine, a wordless way to show I understood and was there for him. As we sat there, something shifted in the air. Maybe it was the way he relaxed into me, or the warmth of his presence. But I became acutely aware of him. The way his hair brushed my cheek, the faint scent of his aftershave, the steady rhythm of his breathing as he calmed. Without thinking, my hand moved to his hair, gently pushing it back. It was soft, and I found myself tracing the line of his jaw, then down to his neck. It was a small, innocent gesture, but it felt charged. I could sense him easing further under my touch, leaning slightly closer. My mind raced, torn between what I was doing and what I should do. I wasn't sure why I kept going, why I didn't pull back. Maybe it was the way he made me feel anchored. Maybe it was just the intensity of the moment. Whatever it was, I couldn't stop. Before I could second-guess myself, I took his hand and placed it on my leg. It was impulsive, the kind of thing you do before your brain catches up. He froze for a split second, clearly caught off guard. But then his hand rested where I'd guided it. I could feel his hesitation, but also a flicker of curiosity. His hand was warm, his touch cautious at first, as if he wasn't sure whether to move or stay still. Slowly, his fingers began to trace small patterns along my thigh, inching upward with each pass. My pulse pounded, and a flush spread across my skin. I wasn't sure where this was heading, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Every nerve in my body was alive, responding to his touch in a way I hadn't felt in ages. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, his hand moving gently, exploring, while I leaned closer, my face resting against the curve of his neck. My body seemed to act on its own, shifting and responding to every motion he made. just as the moment felt like it couldn't get any heavier. The sound of the front door creaking open shattered the silence. I pulled back so fast it was like I'd been shocked. Scrambling to adjust my dress, I put space between us in an instant. My heart was still racing, but now it was panic-driven. Ethan looked just as startled, his face flushed as he shifted away. I barely had time to catch my breath before my parents' voices echoed through the house, a mix of excitement and concern. Forcing myself to stand, I went to greet them, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. They hugged me tightly, bombarding me with questions about why I hadn't told them I was coming. I mumbled something about wanting to surprise them, trying to act as normal as possible. But even as we sat down to dinner, laughing and catching up, my thoughts kept drifting back to that moment in my room. I couldn't shake the memory of Ethan's touch, the way my body had responded. Was he thinking about it too? The rest of the evening blurred by. I smiled and talked on autopilot, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying what had happened with Ethan. The warmth of his hand, the way my body had reacted, the spark in the air between us. It was all so vivid, I couldn't push it away, no matter how hard I tried. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts spiraling, reliving every detail. The way he'd looked at me before we pulled apart, the softness of his touch, the feeling of being so close to him, it was overwhelming. What was he thinking? Was he as shaken as I was? The next day was even harder. Seeing Ethan around the house, passing him in the hallway, felt charged. It wasn't exactly awkward, but it was different, like we both knew something had shifted, but didn't know how to address it. I caught myself watching him, noticing things I hadn't before, the way his jaw tightened when he was lost in thought, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the way he moved with quiet confidence. Every time we crossed paths, my heart skipped, and I overanalyzed every interaction. Did he notice how I looked at him? Was he feeling the same pull, or was he trying to brush it off? I tried to distract myself, but nothing worked. My parents were busy with their own tasks most of the day, leaving me with too much time to think. I kept replaying that moment in my room, imagining how it could have gone differently. What if the door hadn't opened when it did? What if we hadn't stopped? The questions gnawed at me, making me restless. That evening, my dad came into the living room where I was idly scrolling on my phone. He apologized, saying he and my mom had to run errands and felt bad leaving me alone so soon after my return. I waved it off, assuring him it was fine. As soon as they left, the house felt eerily still. It was just Ethan and me, and the quiet seemed to amplify every sound. I tried to focus on something, reading, watching TV, but my mind kept wandering back to the feeling of his hand on my leg, the closeness we'd shared. The idea crept in slowly, but once it took hold, I couldn't shake it. I tried to talk myself out of it, to reason with myself, but the pull was too strong. The memory of the previous day was too fresh. too intense, and the curiosity about what might happen if I didn't stop myself was too tempting. It was late when I finally made up my mind. The house was dark and silent, and I could hear the faint sound of Ethan's breathing through the thin walls. My heart pounded as I tiptoed to his room, my bare feet silent against the wooden floor. When I eased his door open, I saw him lying on his side, facing away from me. He looked peaceful, his breathing slow, and even under the dim glow of a nightlight. For a moment, I stood there, watching him, debating whether to go through with it. But then my feet moved, carrying me to his bed before I could change my mind. I slipped in beside him, careful not to wake him. The mattress dipped under my weight, and I could feel the warmth of his body next to mine. At first, I just lay there, listening to his breathing, feeling the rise and fall of his chest. But the longer I stayed, the faster my own breathing became. I couldn't resist reaching out, lightly brushing his arm to test the waters. His breathing hitched as he began to stir. He rolled onto his back, blinking in confusion as he registered my presence. I saw the surprise in his eyes, the way they widened as he processed the situation. Before he could speak, I reached for his hand and guided it to my leg, just like the day before. He tensed for a moment, his muscles stiff under my touch, but then he relaxed, letting me lead. What followed felt like a haze. My senses zeroed in on everything: the warmth of his hand, the way his fingers moved hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. My heart raced, my skin tingled, and I was completely caught up in the moment. There was a rawness to it, a vulnerability that made it feel so real. It wasn't flawless or polished, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the way we seemed to understand each other without words, the way our movements found a natural rhythm. Even though this was uncharted territory, it felt instinctive, like it was meant to be. Without overthinking, I shifted closer, closing the gap between us in what felt like slow motion. My hand rested on his shoulder, and before he could react, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't tentative, it was bold, charged with all the tension that had been building. I gently but firmly pressed him back onto the bed, my hands on his shoulders, guiding him down until he was lying beneath me. I could feel his body relax into the mattress. His hands instinctively found my waist as I straddled his hips, the sensation of being so close almost dizzying. The kiss deepened, slowing into something deliberate. I felt his grip tighten slightly on my waist, like he was grounding himself. The intensity was nearly overwhelming. My hands moved to his face, framing it as my thumbs brushed the faint stubble along his jaw. His skin was warm, the texture sending a flutter through me. I tilted my head to adjust the kiss, and his lips parted slightly, sending a shiver down my spine. I pressed closer, letting my body rest against his. I was in control, setting the pace, and it felt exhilarating to have that power. There was something deeply intimate about being above him, feeling his heartbeat against me. His hands held me like he didn't want this to end. Our breathing grew heavier, syncing with the rhythm of our lips. Occasionally, I'd pull back just enough to look at him. His eyes were half closed, his lips slightly swollen from the kiss. His chest rose and fell unevenly, like he was struggling to catch his breath. It was one of the most striking sights I'd ever seen. The way he looked at me in those brief pauses, like I was the only thing that mattered, made my heart feel like it might burst. I leaned in again, kissing his jaw, his cheek, the corner of his mouth, before finding his lips once more. Each kiss varied, some quick and teasing, others slow and lingering, like we were savoring every second. His hands began to wander, sliding up my back, then down to my thighs, but it wasn't rushed. He was following my lead, trusting me to set the tone, which only made me want him more. Being above him felt so right, like this was where I was supposed to be. I loved how his body responded to mine, the subtle ways he shifted beneath me, trying to get closer even though we were already pressed together. I felt powerful, yet vulnerable, fully in charge, but completely open to him. If only he knew how much I'd wanted this, how long I'd thought about being this close, finally letting everything that had been simmering between us spill over. The way his hands gripped my waist, the way he looked at me, completely unguarded, made me crave him even more. It wasn't just about the attraction. It was about how much I wanted to be near him, breaking every barrier that had held us back. But just as the moment was reaching its peak, reality crashed in. As I leaned in for another kiss, my mind raced. I wanted to take it further, to move beyond just kissing and touching. My body was practically humming with desire, and his was responding to every move I made. I paused for a second and asked softly, but clearly, "Do you have anything?" His expression shifted confusion at first, like he wasn't sure what I meant, then realization. A shy smile crossed his face, his cheeks flushing faintly. No, I don't," he admitted, stumbling over his words. I didn't expect this. I stared at him, half in disbelief, half exasperated. 19 years old, with a girlfriend, and no protection in his room. I let out a frustrated laugh, shaking my head. "Seriously, Ethan, how do you not have anything?" He tried to explain, mumbling something about not anticipating this moment. It was endearing, in an utterly annoying way. "Come on," I said, still chuckling despite myself, trying to keep the mood light. What kind of boyfriend doesn't keep something on hand? He shrugged, looking sheepish, but also a little guilty.